Before we begin, subscribe for more chilling stories and tell me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. James had always been the wild one in Sleepy Hollow, the kind of guy who chased thrills like they were debts he owed the night. He worked the late shift at the old mill by the river, where the Hudson's fog rolled in thick as secrets, and on weekends, he'd roar through the winding roads on his beat-up Harley, engine growling like a beast unchained. Booze fueled his fire, whiskey shots at the Rusty Lantern, where locals swapped stories over scarred wooden tables. That's where he first heard the tale of the rider of the Hollow Oak, that cursed bend in the road just past the covered bridge, where a massive, twisted oak stood sentinel, its branches clawing at the sky like desperate fingers. They said the rider was no ordinary ghost, but a spectral hitchhiker born from a crash decades back. A motorcyclist who'd lost control on a rainy night, body mangled against the tree, soul splintered into the bark. Now, he appeared to mockers, a shadowy figure with no face, just a void where eyes should be, offering a ride that ended in screams. James laughed it off that night, slamming his glass down hard enough to crack the rim. Ghosts in this town? That's just old fogies scaring kids. I'd outrun that bastard blindfolded. The bar fell quiet, eyes darting to the window where fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. Sarah, the bartender, with her sharp tongue and sharper regrets, leaned in close, her voice a whisper laced with warning. Mock it if you want, Jimmy, but that oak remembers, and it hungers. He shrugged it off, tossed a crumpled 20 on the bar, and wrapped his bike into the mist-shrouded streets, the wind whipping his leather jacket like invisible hands trying to hold him back. The road to his cabin twisted through the hollow, leaves rustling under tires that bit the asphalt with greedy hunger. He pushed the throttle, feeling the vibration climb his spine, a familiar high that drowned out the world's dull edges. But as he neared the bridge, the air grew headier, charged with the scent of wet earth and decay, like the ground itself was exhaling old griefs. Headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the oak ahead, its trunk scarred and blackened, roots bulging like veins under the soil. James slowed just enough to smirk at the tree, flipping at the bird through his glove. Come on, rider, show me what you've got. Nothing. Just the wind sighing through branches, carrying a faint echo that might have been laughter, or maybe just the river's murmur. He gunned the engine, leaving the spot behind, but in his rear view, the fog seemed to coil tighter, as if reluctant to let go. Back home, he cracked a beer and crashed on the couch, the room spinning from the liquor, dreams pulling him under like undertow. In sleep, the oak loomed larger, its shadow stretching across his bed, and he felt a weight settle on his chest. Not fear, not yet, but something colder, like fingers tracing the outline of his ribs. He woke sweating, the clock glowing 2:17 a.m., and for a moment, he swore he heard the distant rumble of an engine, not his own, idling just beyond the window. Shaking it off as hangover haze, he stepped outside for air, the night air biting sharp against his skin. The moon hung low, bathing the woods in silver, and far off toward the hollow, a pinpoint of light flickered, like a headlight winking in the dark. He told himself it was a trucker on the interstate, nothing more. But his pulse quickened, a seed of doubt planting roots in the quiet hours. The next day dawned gray and unrelenting, rain pattering against his roof like impatient knuckles. James skipped the mill, nursing coffee black as his mood, the story from the bar gnawing at him like a persistent itch. By evening, restlessness clawed him out the door again, keys in hand, bike calling from the shed. One ride, he muttered, pulling on his helmet, the visor reflecting his own defiant grin. Prove it's bullshit. The road unfurled slick under the downpour, wipers on his mind's eye blurring the edges of reality. He hit the hollow faster this time, rain stinging his face like accusations, the oak emerging from the storm like a judge in session. No smirk this time, just a glance half expecting the shadows to shift. And they did. There, at the base of the tree, a figure huddled, indistinct in the deluge, arms raised in silent plea. No legs, just a torso melting into the mud, a blur of coat and hat that screamed wrongness. James's gut twisted, accelerator slamming down instinctively, the bike surging forward with a roar that drowned his curse. In the side mirror, the figure was gone, swallowed by Wayne, but then a shape, loping alongside. Not running, but bounding on all fours, unnaturally swift, keeping pace with his 60, 70 miles an hour. It laughed, a wet, gurgling sound that cut through the engine's howl, burrowing into his skull like worms. He blinked hard, water blurring his vision, but the thing was there. Elongated limbs, no face, just a maw of shadow grinning wide open. Panic bloomed hot in his chest, hands slick on the grips, the road a treacherous ribbon slick with dread. The weight hit then, sudden and impossible. A heavy slump on the rear seat, the bike dipping low as if burdened by stone. Though the speedometer climbed past 90, wind screaming in protest. James twisted, risking a glance back, and saw nothing but empty leather, rain beating on it like tears. Yet the pressure was real, compressing the suspension, and voices slithered into his ears, overlapping in a chorus of gravel and wind. "Faster, James! Faster!" They knew his name, each syllable a needle prick, echoing from the hollow oak's memory, pulling threads of his mockery back to haunt him. Guilt flickered unbidden, memories of his own wreck years ago, a bar fight spilling onto the road, a friend lost to the guardrail, blood mixing with bourbon. Had he laughed then too? The voices swelled, a cacophony of the damned, whispering accusations. "You mocked us, now ride with us." The loping shadow veered closer. Pause, hands, pounding the asphalt in rhythm with his heartbeat, its laughter sinking to the engine's stutter. Thunder cracked overhead, lightning etching the oak in stark white, revealing faces in the bark, twisted, pleading, the rider's victims etched eternal. James's vision tunneled, paranoia gripping like frost, every shadow a claw reaching. He swerved to shake the phantom rider, tires hydroplaning on the wet blacktop, the bike fishtailing toward the river's edge. Brakes locked, but momentum betrayed him, metal grinding earth as he laid it down, sliding into gravel that tore at his jeans and skin. Pain exploded in his ankle, a sharp twist that buckled him, the Harley skidding to rest against a stump, its headlight flickering like a dying eye. He lay there, rain pounding his face, chest heaving, the weight lifting at last, voices fading to the storm's growl. No rider, no shadow, just the hollow's hush broken by his ragged breaths. Groaning, he hauled himself up, ankle throbbing with fire, and righted the bike, its frame scraped but intact. Limping to the saddle, he fired it up, the engine coughing back to life with reluctant fury. No way back through the oak tonight. He veered onto a side trail, overgrown and rutted, branches whipping his arms like vengeful spirits. The headlight pierced the underbrush, casting erratic beams that danced over roots like serpents, and behind him the rumble persisted, not his exhaust, but another, phantom engine shadowing his flight. In the mirror, twin glows bobbed, closing the gap, laughter bubbling up again, closer now, intimate as a lover's breath. His mind fractured under the assault, doubts cascading. Was this payback for the friend he'd abandoned, left bleeding while he fled the scene? The guilt he'd buried under bravado and throttle now clawed free, feeding the specter. The trail spat him out near the old mill, its silhouette looming like a forgotten god, windows dark as empty sockets. He killed the engine, silence crashing in, broken only by dripping eaves and his own whimpers. Staggering inside, he barricaded the door with a crate, collapsing against the wall, ankles swelling purple under the dim bulb. Hours blurred, the night pressing in, and outside, the rain eased to a patter, but the sounds lingered, scratching at the walls, low chuckles filtering through cracks, the faint rev of an unseen bike circling the lot. Dawn crept in reluctant, gray light seeping through grimy panes, revealing scratches on the door he'd swear weren't there before, deep gouges like claws from something that crawled. James hobbled out, bike waiting like a faithful dog, but he couldn't bring himself to mount it, not yet. The hollow called, a psychic pull tugging at his marrow, promising answers in the oak's shadow. Days turned to weeks, the incident festering like an untreated wound, sleep stolen by whispers that named his sins, shadows pooling in corners of his cabin, forming vague outlines of the legless form. He avoided the lantern, Sarah's text going unanswered. "You okay, Jimmy? Saw your light last night." Each ping a spark of paranoia, wondering if she'd seen more than lights. One fog-choked evening, compulsion won. He rode out, slower now, the Harley purring warily toward the bend. The oak waited, branches swaying in greeting, and as he slowed, the air thickened, fog coiling around the trunk like smoke from a grave. There it was again, the rider, perched on a low limb, torso swaying, void face tilting in curiosity. No run this time. James killed the engine, dismounting with a wince, ankle protesting the weight. He approached, heart hammering a dirge, the figure unmoving, silent. Up close, the bark pulsed faintly, warm under his fingers, and in its whirls he saw his own face, younger, laughing at the wreck site, turning away. The rider extended a hand, not flesh but tendril of shadow, and James took it, cold seeping bone deep, visions flooding, the crash that birthed it, pain eternal, the hunger for companions in the ride. He jerked back, but the grip held, pulling him closer, voices rising in welcome. "Join us, James. Ride forever." Terror crested, pure and primal, and he wrenched free, bolting for the bike, engine roaring to life as the hollow erupted in gales, branches thrashing like fury unleashed. He fled, the phantom engine pursuing once more, but this time he didn't look back, vowing silence on the tail, the oak's curse now etched in his soul. Sleepy Hollow whispered on, its roads claiming another thread in the legend. James forever changed, haunted rider in a town of ghosts where every rev echoed with the dead's unquenched thirst. Robert gripped the wheel of his 18-wheeler, the diesel engine humming a low dirge through the fog-shrouded miles between Portland, Maine, and Boston's glittering sprawl. It was pushing 2 in the morning, the kind of hour where the world folded in on itself, headlights carving tunnels through the mist rolling off Casco Bay like ghosts reluctant to sleep. He'd been hauling freight for 20 years, tires worn thin as his patience, coffee black as the Doutsbat nipped at his heels. Lately, the roads whispered to him, shadows in the rear view twisting into shapes that reminded him of the wife he'd lost to cancer 3 winters back, her laugh fading into the static of CB chatter. Tonight, the air hung heavy with salt and regret, the interstate a black vein pulsing under sodium lamps that flickered like failing memories. He spotted them at the edge of a rest stop, just past the state line, 2 figures huddled under the sodium glow, thumbs out like fragile flags in the wind. Young women, early 20s maybe, bundled in threadbare coats that flapped like broken wings. One had hair the color of autumn leaves, tangled and wild, the other, straight as a blade, framing a face pale as moonlit snow. They waved as his rig slowed, brakes hissing steam into the chill, and he cursed under his breath, debating the detour. But their eyes caught him, pleading, shadowed, and carrying a weight that tugged at something very deep. "Heading to Boston?" the redhead called, voice cutting through the engine's rumble like a shard of glass. Her name was Emily, she said, and her friend Jessica, both students from a community college up in Bangor, stranded after their bus broke down hours ago. "We just need a lift to the city. Please, it's freezing out here." Robert nodded, jerking his thumb toward the cab's passenger side. "Hop in, but no funny business. I got a schedule." They climbed up, boots scraping the step, a gust of cold air following them like an uninvited third. Emily slid into the middle, Jessica by the window, their presence filling the cab with a faint scent of rain, soaked earth, and something sweeter, like wilted jasmine. He pulled back onto the highway, the rig groaning into motion, wipers slapping rhythmically against the misted windshield. Conversation started halting, their voices soft, overlapping in the dim glow of the dash lights. Emily chatted about classes, art history, dreams of galleries in the city, while Jessica stared out at the passing pines, fingers tracing patterns on the fog glass, shapes that looked like fractured roads. Robert shared snippets of his life, the miles blurring into confessions, the empty house in Portland, the bottle of bourbon waiting like a false friend, the way grief had carved hollows under his eyes. They laughed at his jokes, light and tinkling, but there was an undercurrent, a pause in their breaths that synced with the engine's stutter. Halfway through, Jessica turned, her eyes locking in his in the mirror, dark pools reflecting nothing but the road behind. "You ever feel like you're driving towards something you can't outrun?" she asked, voice dropping low, almost lost in the hum. Robert swallowed, throat dry despite the thermos of coffee. "Every damn night." Emily leaned closer, her hand brushing his arm, cool as autumn wind. "We're all running from wrecks, aren't we? The ones we cause. The ones that cause us." He glanced at her, saw the flicker in her gaze. Not fear, but knowing, as if she'd peeled back his skin to read the scars. The miles ticked by, fog thickening until the world shrank to the cab's bubble, their stories weaving tighter. They spoke of a party in Bangor the night before, too much cheap wine, a decision to catch the late bus south, but details blurred, times that didn't add up. A mention of a bridge collapse that Robert swore he'd heard on the radio, though the static had swallowed it whole. Jessica hummed a tune then, old and mournful, fingers drumming the dash in a rhythm that echoed the tires on cracked asphalt. Emily joined in, harmonies layering like smoke, and Robert felt it creep in. The unease, a psychological itch under his ribs, guilt from that rainy night years ago when he'd nodded off at the wheel, clipping a sedan, the driver's scream haunting his dreams ever since. Had he checked on them? Or driven on, heart pounding, telling himself it was nothing? The cab grew colder, vents blowing drafts that raised goosebumps on his arms, and in the mirror, their reflections wavered, edges softening like melting wax. He shook it off, chalking it to fatigue, the long haul wearing thin. Boston's lights pierced the fog ahead, a constellation of false promises, and he eased the rig toward the drop-off point near the harbor, docks creaking under the weight of absent ships. "This is it, ladies. Stay safe out there." They thanked him, voices warm now, almost tender. Emily pressing a damp scrap of paper into his palm, a phone number scrawled in faded ink, and Jessica's smile lingering like a bruise. He watched them melt into the night, figures dissolving into the throng of early morning shadows, coats blending with the mist. He idled the engine as he unfolded the paper, digits blurring before his eyes, and a chill settled deeper, unrelated to the damp. Shrugging it away, he gunned the throttle, merging back into the flow, the harbor's salt sting fading behind. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving as he parked at his usual lot near the Charles River, bones aching from the seat's embrace. He unfolded the local paper from the glove box, headlines screaming of gridlock and scandals, But one story snagged his gaze. A charter bus from Bangor, careening off the interstate just before midnight, slamming into an overpass support in a fireball of twisted metal and shattered glass. 30 souls gone, the article said. Flames so fierce that they charred identities to bone. Robert's coffee cup slipped from numb fingers, splashing dark across the page. There, in grainy black and white, two faces stared back, Emily and Jessica, named among the victims. Their college IDs snapped weeks before, smiles frozen in time. The crash timestamp, 11:47 p.m., over 2 hours before he'd picked them up at that rest stop. His breath caught, ragged and shallow. The cab closing in like a coffin lid. Paranoia bloomed, hot and insidious. Had he imagined it all? The chill of their touch, the jasmine scent clinging to his jacket like accusation. He clawed at the door, stumbling into the lot, knees buckling against the asphalt. The paper clutched, like a talisman or curse. Voices echoed in his skull, their harmonies twisting into whispers. You drove us, Robert, right to the end. The breakdown hit like a freight train all its own, Robert's vision tunneling to black spots as he retched into the gutter, bile tasting of regret and diesel. Paramedics found him there, curled fetal under the rig's shadow, muttering about ghosts in the fog, their gloved hands prying the crumpled article from his fist. They carted him to Massachusetts General, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets overhead, doctors murmuring of exhaustion, dehydration, a nervous collapse born from the grind. But Robert knew better. The weight in his chest wasn't fatigue, but the press of spectral fingers. Emily's cool palm on his arm replaying in loops that peeled back layers of denial. They kept him overnight, IV dripping slow salvation into his veins, but sleep evaded, the room's corners pooling with shadow that whispered names. Jessica's hum slittered through the vents, low and insistent, drawing forth buried guilts, that swerve on the icy Maine Turnpike 5 years back, the compact car he'd sideswiped, its driver, a young mother, papers later said, left crumpled, her last breath fogging the window as he sped away, license plate unnoted in the panic. We all calls Rex, Emily's voice echoed now, not in memory, but present, curling from the beeping monitors like smoke. He bolted upright at dawn, signing discharge papers with trembling hands, the nurse's pitying glance fueling the fire of isolation. Back on the road by noon, he avoided the interstate, taking back roads that snaked through Salem's witch-haunted fringes where gnarled trees clawed at the sky like accusatory limbs. The rig felt tainted, cab reeking of phantom jasmine, every bump jolting echoes of their laughter. He stopped at a diner off Route 1, fluorescent tubes humming over Formica counters, locals nursing eggs and suspicion. The paper lay folded in his pocket, but he couldn't resist spreading it flat. Faces staring up unaltered, captions detailing the bus's tire blowout, the driver's futile swerve into oblivion. A trucker at the next stool, grizzled beard framing knowing eyes, caught his stare. Heard about that smash? Bad night on the blacktop. They say souls linger sometimes, hitching rides to settle scores. Robert froze, fork midway to mouth, the man's words burrowing like hooks. You believe that crap? He rasped, voice cracking on the edge. The trucker shrugged, sipping sludge Black Joe. Seen things. Shadows in the mirror that ain't yours. Guilt's a hell of a fuel. He left a tip and fled, the diner's bell jangling like a warning, engine roaring defiance as he hit the gas. But the paranoia clung, thickening with each mile. Headlights in the rearview blooming into twin orbs that matched his pace, fading when he checked, reappearing like taunts. Dusk fell early, painting the sky bruised purple over Gloucester's fishing wharfs, where gulls screamed elegies to the drowned. He pulled into a lot by the breakwater, waves crashing rhythmic against pilings, salt spray misting the windshield like tears. The radio crackled to life unbidden, static resolving into a news bulletin. Memorial service for the Bangor victims tomorrow, families seeking closure in the chapel's stained glass gloom. Robert's hand hovered over the dial, but instead he killed the engine, silence crashing in heavy as judgment. Footsteps crunched on gravel outside, soft, deliberate,
and his pulse thundered, door handle slick under sweating palm. There they stood, silhouettes etched against the harbor's sodium haze, coats dripping seawater that pooled black at their feet. Emily stepped forward, face serene in the half-light, Jessica flanking her, fingers intertwined like roots from the same grave. "You left us behind once," Emily said, voice carrying over the wave's roar, calm as confession. "Don't do it again." Terror gripped him, psychological vice squeezing lungs, visions flashing, the mother's car spinning into the ditch, her eyes wide in the mirror as he accelerated. Guilt he drowned in miles and malt, now surfacing spectral and insatiable. Jessica tilted her head, smile fracturing into something sharper. "Ride with us now. To Boston. To the end." He slammed the door, key fumbling in the ignition, diesel bellowing to life as he peeled out, tires screeching accusations into the night. The shadows pursued, loping at the edges of his beams, whispers infiltrating the cab, harmony swelling to dirge, naming his sins in layered accusation. He pushed south, Boston's skyline a jagged promise, but the road twisted inward, miles looping in delusion, signs for Portland reappearing, fog coiling eternal. Hours bled into eternity, exhaustion blurring real from revenant, until dawn's first blush kissed the Charles, the rig shuddering to a halt outside the hospital again. He staggered out, paper in hand, faces mocking from its folds, but now a third photo caught his eye. His own, from an old license, aged but unmistakable. Captioned in fresh ink, "Unidentified witness, last seen fleeing the scene." Panic crested, raw and final, as paramedics swarmed once more, their grips firm anchors in the unraveling. Robert collapsed into their arms, whispers fading to silence, the hitchhiker's eyes lingering in his mind's eye, eternal passengers on a road that led only to reckoning, where every mile carried the weight of the dead, unrelenting and unforgiving.
Sarah gripped the steering wheel of her old Subaru, knuckles whitening against the cracked leather, as the narrow road twisted through the fog-draped hills outside Asheville. It was well past midnight, the kind of hour where the Blue Ridge Mountains swallowed sound and spat back echoes of forgotten things. She'd lingered too long at the family gathering up at Aunt Clara's remote cabin, a sprawling timber affair perched on the edge of Pisgah Forest, where laughter had flowed like moonshine and stories of old Cherokee spirits had crackled around the fire pit. Her son Ethan, 7 and fidgety even in sleep, slumped against the door beside her, his small chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. In the back, little Mia, barely 4, clutched her stuffed rabbit, its button eyes glinting faintly in the dashboard glow. The party had been a rare escape, a tether to normalcy after the divorce papers finalized 6 months back, Mark's absence a hollow ache that gnawed at quiet moments. She'd driven these back roads 100 times, but tonight they felt alien. The asphalt slick with recent rain, headlights carving feeble arcs through mist that clung like reluctant breath. No streetlights pierced the gloom here, just the occasional flash of reflective markers, winking like distant eyes. And the radio hissed static laced with snippets of a late-night talk show debating hauntings in the hollows. She muted it, preferring the hum of tires on gravel-laced blacktop, but unease stirred low in her gut, a psychological whisper born of isolation and the wine she'd nursed to dull the edges. Ethan stirred, mumbling about the s'mores they'd scarfed earlier, his voice pulling her back. "Mom, when we get home, can we make more, with extra chocolate?" She forced a smile into the rear view, catching Mia's sleepy nod. "Tomorrow, kiddo. Promise." But the words hung heavy, the road ahead narrowing into a serpentine drop toward the valley, pines looming like silent judges on either flank. Memories flickered unbidden. The night Mark stormed out after one too many arguments, his tires spitting gravel as he vanished into these same hills, leaving her with fractured sleep and a guilt that whispered she could have mended it sooner. Had she pushed too hard? Or not enough? The fog thickened, swallowing the tree line, and Sarah eased off the gas,
the engine's purr the only heartbeat in the void. Up ahead, something disrupted the ribbon of road. A dark lump at the center line, amorphous in the beam's edge, like a discarded trash bag bloated with secrets. She blinked, wiping condensation from the wheel with his sleeve, heart quickening a notch. Animals roamed these woods freely. Deer, raccoons, the occasional black bear lumbering from the underbrush. But this held still, unnatural in its repose. "Stay buckled," she murmured to the kids, though Ethan was already peering forward, nose pressed to the glass. The lump resolved as she closed the distance. Not refuse, but fur, matted and coarse, the shape of a dog seated upright in the middle of the lane, paws tucked neat as a supplicant's. A stray, she thought, one of those mangy hounds that haunted farmsteads, scavenging for scraps in the shadow of the mountains. But it didn't bolt at the rumble of the engine, didn't flinch from the glare of high beams that painted its form in stark relief. Brindle coat slick with dew, ears pricked forward, tail unmoving. Sarah honked once, sharp and futile, the sound swallowed by the mist. "Move, boy," she breathed, foot hovering over the brake. Ethan giggled nervously. "It's just a doggy, Mom, like the one in that movie." But Mia whimpered, rabbit hugged tighter, her small voice piping up, "It looks mean." The Subaru creeped closer, 20 yards now, 10, the hound's silhouette sharpening into something almost deliberate, its posture regal amid the desolation. Sarah's pulse thrummed in her ears, a cadence syncing with the wiper's slap, and she felt the first prick of paranoia. Why here? Why now, on this forsaken stretch where cell signal died like a snuffed flame? The dog's head lifted then, slow and measured, muzzle rising above the headlight's cutoff line, as if ascending from some subterranean lair. Its eyes met hers through the windshield, not the frantic gleam of a cornered beast, but a steady burn, amber flecked with voids that pierced the glass like it was mere vapor. No fear there, no wildness, just recognition, cold and intimate as if it knew the contours of her face, the regrets etched in her furrowed brow. Its head tilted then, a subtle cant that skewed the jaw unnaturally, shadows playing across fur that seemed to ripple like smoke. Ethan screamed then, a piercing wail that shattered the cab's fragile calm. "Mom, it's looking at me!" Sarah slammed the brake, tires locking in a skid that fishtailed the car toward the shoulder, gravel crunching under rubber like brittle bones. She wrenched the wheel, the Subaru veering wide, clipping the hound's flank with a thud that vibrated through the frame. It didn't yelp, didn't scatter, just held that gaze unblinking as they barreled past, the rear view flooding with its form receding into the fog, head still cocked in mocking curiosity. Mia sobbed openly now, Ethan's cries joining in a cacophony that clawed at Sarah's nerves, her hands trembling as she righted the course, accelerator punch to flee the spot. But the image lingered, seared retinal, those eyes, not animal, but human in their scrutiny, boring through metal and glass to strip her bare, as if the hound had glimpsed the fractures in her soul, the unspoken apologies to Mark, the fear of failing her children in the quiet hours. The road straightened, Asheville's distant lights a hazy beacon, but the chill deepened, vents blowing drafts that carried a faint, musky scent, like wet fur and unearthed soil. Ethan quieted first, sniffling into his sleeve. "Did it see us, Mom? Like really see us?" Sarah swallowed, throat dry as ash. "Just a dog, sweetie. Strays get bold out here." But doubt coiled tighter, psychological tendrils wrapping her thoughts, whispering of old Asheville tales, the skinwalkers of Cherokee lore, beasts that wore pelts to stalk the unwary, eyes holding the souls of the restless dead. Mia's whimpers faded to hiccups, the rabbit's ears flopping limp, and Sarah glanced back, catching a flicker in the side mirror, twin ambers glowing brief in the dark, pacing parallel through the trees, then gone. She blamed the fog, the adrenaline crash, but her grip tightened, knuckles bone white, the miles to home stretched eternal under a moon that watched indifferent. Home was a modest rancher on the outskirts of Asheville, porch light flickering like a hesitant pulse against the encroaching woods,
the driveway crunching under tires that still hummed with the skid's echo. Sarah killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the kids' residual sniffles, and bundled them inside, their small forms warm anchors against the night's chill that had seeped bone deep. Ethan clutched her leg, eyes wide saucers in the hallway's yellow bulb. "Promise no more doggies tonight?" She knelt, smoothing his tousled hair, forcing calm into her voice. "Promise. Bedtime stories instead." Mia nodded solemnly, rabbit trailing from one hand as Sarah herded them upstairs, tucking blankets tight, the routine of fragile ward against the unease gnawing her edges. But as she descended, the house felt altered, shadows pooling thicker in corners, the tick of the kitchen clock a deliberate heartbeat sinking to her own erratic thrum. She poured herbal tea, hands unsteady on the mug, steam curling like spectral fingers, and sank into the armchair by the window, staring out at the tree line where mist lingered like unspoken accusations. Guilt surfaced unbidden, sharp as the hound's gaze, the arguments with Mark that escalated in these very rooms, his pleas for space met with her barbs, the final drive he'd taken into the night mirroring her own tonight. Had she driven him away as surely as she'd swerved from the beast? Paranoia bloomed, insidious and hot, convincing her the divorce wasn't fate but fault, her fault, etched in every strained goodbye. A scratch sounded then, faint at first, from the back door, branches on siding, she told herself, wind stirring the oaks. But it persisted, rhythmic, deliberate, like nails etching pleas into wood. Sarah froze, mug halfway to lips, ears straining over the house's creaks. Outside, the moon silvered the yard, illuminating nothing but dew-kissed grass, yet the air thickened, carrying that musky tang again, closer now, infiltrating through the cracks. She rose, peering through the lace curtain, breath fogging the pane, and there, at the tree line's edge, the hound sat, brindle form statue still, head tilted in that same unnatural angle, eyes locking on the window with predatory patience. Not stray, not beast, something older, hungrier, its gaze peeling back the glass to find her huddled form as if it had followed the road's curve straight to her threshold, drawn by the fractures in her resolve. Terror crested, psychological wave crashing over reason, visions flashing. Mark's car found wrapped around a mountain oak weeks after he vanished. No note, just skid marks and whispers of a woman scorned. Had the hound been there, waiting in the fog for him too? Or was it her? Projected guilt manifesting in fur and fang, a supernatural mirror to the abandonment she'd inflicted. It tilted further, jaw unhinging slightly, a low whine threading the night. Not pain, but invitation, a sound that burrowed into her skull like worms, stirring Mia's cries from upstairs, Ethan's murmur of "Mommy?" echoing down. Sarah backed away, heart slamming cage-rattling blows, fumbling for the phone on the side table, but the line hissed dead static, whispers threading through, fragmented Cherokee chants, Mark's voice layered faint. "Why didn't you stop me?" The scratching intensified, circling the house now, paws patting soft on the porch, the hound's shadow elongating across the floorboards, stretching tendrils toward her feet. She bolted for the stairs, scooping the kids mid-wake, their confusion a blur as she herded them to the attic room, barricading the hatch with an old trunk, breaths ragged in the dust-moted dark. Down below, the assault mounted, doors rattling in frames, windows groaning under invisible weight, the hound's whine swelling to a howl that shook the rafters, eyes in possible multiplicity glowing through floor slats like embers from hell. Paranoia fractured further, Sarah clutching Ethan and Mia close, their warmth the only tether as guilt cascaded. The night she'd snapped at the children, echoes of her own mother's cold silences, a cycle she'd sworn to break, but now saw mirrored in the hound's unrelenting stare. Dawn clawed its way through the shutters at last, gray light seeping like reluctant mercy, the sounds ebbing to silence, the house reclaiming stillness. They descended trembling, finding scratches gouged deep into every door, fur tufted and brindle-streaked, but the hound gone,
vanished into the morning mist as if reclaimed by the hollows. Sarah called in sick for work, bundling the kids for a drive to town, but the rear view haunted her still, twin ambers flickering brief in the pines, a tilt of shadow promising return. Weeks blurred into weary routine, Asheville's folklore festivals buzzing with tales of shapeshifters in the ridges. But Sarah avoided the roads at night, guilt festering like an opened wound, the hound's gaze a perpetual specter in dreams, tilting eternal, seeing through flesh to the sins she couldn't outrun. Ethan drew it once, in crayons crude and telling, a dog with human eyes, mouth whispering, "Stop." And Sarah burned the paper in the sink, ashes swirling like fog, wondering if the next twist in the dark would bring it home for good.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more terrifying stories.